everyone, and welcome once again to CoMotion Labs. My name is Suni, and as many of you I'm sure know, I'm the manager of this floor. A quick background on CoMotion Labs for those of you that are new in the audience. CoMotion Labs is a multi-industry incubator that the University of Washington owns. This building in the back has about 24 different startups that are working on augmented and virtual reality, and we have 2 other sites on campus proper. Fluke Hall hosts startups that are in the engineering, life sciences, and medical devices area. They also have a makerspace that has just become open to the public in the past several weeks. And then our third space is Startup Hall, and that hosts startups that are in the IT and software realm. They also are home to Bunker Labs and Techstars. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the last event in our 5-part blockchain basics series. It's been a phenomenal past few weeks. I want to thank those of you that have been coming for coming, and those of you that are new, welcome. Our goal was to provide sessions that were approaching the technology in an accessible way, and so I hope that was useful for those of you that have been coming. We have saved one of my favorite events for last. This event is going to be called the Tulip Coin Bubble, and we have 4 speakers as well as the Associate Director of CoMotion Labs, Elizabeth Scallon, moderating the event. I want to give so much thanks to our 2 sponsors for this event, the Seattle Angel Conference and John Seacrest. Thank you so much for sponsoring this event. And then the Seattle Angel Fund and the Seattle Entrepreneurships Club. Thank you as well. Elizabeth, take it away.
Yeah. Thank you, Suni. So thank you all for being here. So I am going to start with letting all the panelists introduce themselves and talk about the organizations that they represent. So go ahead, Maria.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us over for lunch and for an interesting discussion. I'm Maria Karaivanova. I'm a principal at Madrona Ventures, and we're a fund, local fund here in Seattle. We invest in early-stage startups. Majority of our portfolio is local, Seattle, and then Pacific Northwest, so Portland, Vancouver. And very happy to be here. Blockchain is an area of interest for us at Madrona. I personally focus on enterprise, B2B investments. I spend time looking into the IoT space, voice space, and intelligent applications.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm Lawrence Lerner. I'm the CEO of Pithia. We're a blockchain venture company based here in Seattle. We take investments too, focus solely on blockchain in concept stage companies and then existing software companies that are refactoring to add blockchain to their technology stack. We're a $170 million fund today. We've taken 2 investments since the beginning of the year, since we ramped up. Life ID and Trusted Key, both here in Washington, continuing to grow. We've got a huge pipeline and always so excited about everything that goes on in Washington. And we do look for investments in other parts and working to help grow the blockchain ecosystem.
I'm Adam Gering. I'm the co-founder of CoinZ Studio. CoinZ Studio is a blockchain venture studio. We build decentralized application companies. We're a lab in a similar vein to Madrona Venture Labs or Pioneer Square Labs. And we're focused exclusively on next-gen blockchains.
Hello, everyone. My name is Haresh Ved. Former Microsoftie, thought I was an expert in technology, but then I found out I was not. So launched a fund to invest in early stage technology companies, Cronus Ventures. Have been a member of TIE Seattle, which is a nonprofit organization to promote entrepreneurship and innovations and all. Launched the TIE Angels group, so that was the genesis of funding in TIE Seattle. Mostly technology investments. I'm a student of blockchain, so I'm here to learn more rather than talk. So we'll find out.
So thank you all for letting us know who you are and what you represent and kind of what stage you're at. Haresh is very modest with his view. He's obviously deep knowledge in both the startup community and in blockchain. And I believe you might be the only one on this panel that hasn't actually invested yet in blockchain for your organization. So maybe we'll have you go last, and maybe you 3 want to talk about why are you investing in blockchain, and maybe one example of a blockchain company. I know you talked about Trusted Key and Life ID, Lawrence, but maybe you guys can mention a startup that you have invested in blockchain.
Sure. I'll start since I've got the mic. blockchain, like any other platform technology, is continuing to grow. We're in the home of AWS, Microsoft Azure. Digital identity, our first fund is based on picks and shovels. All of those foundational things that you need. So as we started, we looked at what does everybody need? You need an identity solution to do almost anything. And that was why the two companies that we're working with and looking for more around wallets and exchanges are really foundational to getting the ecosystem launched. So they'll do millions of transactions an hour rather than great aspirational things that we know will happen in healthcare and insurance. That's where we're starting. We'll continue to grow.
So we also have a fund that does seed investing, but I can't publicly talk about our investment activities right now. But I can talk about a company that I personally invested in. It was called CoinMe. It's the Bitcoin ATM operator. And what's interesting about that is how I found that company. I was in a co-working space very similar to CoMotion Labs here. And I just happened to meet the founders before they founded that company. And they learned about my background in cryptography and alternative digital currency. So when they did found the company, they came and asked me advice. And so that's how I got access to that company. And so it's, the next billion-dollar companies are students in the computer science department or the business school right here at the UW or right here in CoMotion Labs. So just, getting out and meeting people is probably the best. You can get better deal flow than I can. You have access to the next generation of entrepreneurs right here.
She said I should go last.
Do you want to talk about, has Madrona invested in any blockchain startups? And
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. So we've definitely spent a lot of time looking into cryptocurrencies and the blockchain technology. We haven't announced any investments to date. Having said that, our venture studio, Madrona Venture Labs, together with TIE Seattle, organized a blockchain event, and recently, a couple of months ago, and some really good projects came out of there. Some of them are still kind of live and actively being developed. So definitely exciting times, but nothing that I can discuss right today.
Perfect. Now, Haresh, do you want to talk about sort of why you're a little on the edge of investing on blockchain, and do you think that you will make an investment within the next year?
So first of all, we don't have the deep pockets Madrona has. We are small angel investors. But I think blockchain as a platform has a lot of promise. It has now proven that it has lots of real-world applications which can really bring the change and disruption really necessary. And not going into further details about what it is, I'm sure you already know that. But as an angel investor, my perspective is quite different. I think it's very speculative at this stage. I think even the platforms, even though some have matured, it is still very early on. It's probably like Excel, to second or third version. You wait until the third version until it has all the kinks worked out. I think we are at the stage of 2.0, if not 3.0. There's a lot to be done in terms of the platform, and that will probably create opportunities. To me also, it's more about bigger investments, which it takes a lot longer for companies to succeed in this space. So as I go along, I'm learning. So far, we've seen a few applications to a few companies, but I haven't really seen companies really substantiate why they really use blockchain. Many of them falter. Maybe I learn a lot more about what exactly they're missing or how they can change it. And the other thing is monetization. The real contributors, companies making money, or subsequently how investors would end up making money, or it's just a bet we are making.
So, I mean, that kind of brings us to the point, Gartner is a group that kind of looks at this hype cycle. And so they've actually put blockchain at the peak of inflated expectations, sort of at the top of this hype cycle. And they say that it's about to hit the trough of disillusionment. And that's a period of maybe 5 to 10 years before you really see market adoption, where everyone would just be using blockchain as like your web browser, right? So there isn't big market adoption yet. It's still in this, from Gartner. Do you guys believe in this sort of projection 5 years to 10 years out before mass adoption? Warren Buffett just made some claims yesterday, same with Gates, that they're kind of skeptical still about the entire industry. What's your reaction to this? Do you believe it? Was it accurate?
So Bill also said, I don't believe in web browsers. And we know where Microsoft is today, and I'm not making fun. There's a lot of change that's happening in the industry. We are exactly where the internet was in this same cycle with the blockchain. This is in what we call a rational exuberance in the blockchain space, but we are working with companies and other companies that we know that are doing real world work with blockchain. Company here in Seattle is doing blockchain for their supply chain, coffee. It's real simple. It's For us, it's all the ordinary, boring things that you do millions of times an hour. Life ID has already signed 6 deals for use of their platform. And I don't want to keep pushing the companies, but the point is there are lots of people that need new identity platforms. Why we saw what happened with Facebook. I'm going to stop because you got me excited.
It's an excellent question, and there's so much debate. Like you can't open a newspaper or a website without seeing something on one side or the other. It's overhyped, it's underhyped. You know, it's gonna be the next big thing. It's gonna be complete bubble. So it's the way I view it is 5 to 10 years in the venture world. That's not a long time. You know, if you look at companies that we have backed, like say Smartsheet or Redfin, I mean, we're day one investor. So we need at least 5 to 10 years to see a company be successful and to see the cycle prove itself. So actually what Elizabeth was saying makes me feel very happy because 5 to 10 years is not that long for us. And so the way I view it is, can I find the application and the team that I trust to see the vision through and to execute on it? And you know, once I do, I'd be more than happy to back them and work very closely with them. And you know, we have, to your point, we've seen a lot of great applications on the enterprise blockchain space. So you know, there are kind of several players there, but 2 worth mentioning are Ripple, the Ripple blockchain, and then the Hyperledger blockchain that IBM spends a lot of time on. So Ripple has already, it's out in the real world helping banks with remittances. And they have, you know, they have the blockchain part, which is the Ripple, and then they have the XRP, their currency, which is, you know, the cryptocurrency. And they've done a really good job of talking about those 2 things as separate. And what's interesting about them, and you know, we're not an investor, unfortunately, but what's interesting about them, they have now become kind of the standard. So you see hedge funds and venture funds that are Ripple denominated. And those applications are very exciting. So in the bank space, remittances, sending money overseas, they have real banks like Santander using them and others, you know. So those are some, and we can go on and on for use cases maybe a little bit later.
Yeah, so we're actually approaching almost the 10-year anniversary that Satoshi posted on the cryptography list that I'm working on a digital cash system that's truly peer-to-peer with no centralized authority. And so we've already gone through the trough of disillusionment and come out on the other side now. I mean, Satoshi proved that you could have peer-to-peer permissionless transfer of digital assets with no authority. It's proven that it secures hundreds of billions of dollars, and it hasn't. He also proved that a network with no systems administrator can come to consensus on value that actually matters. And it's done that for the last 10 years. There's a whole generation of new blockchains coming online just in the next year. EOS, RChain, Definity, Tezos, and they bring a whole new layer to the computational power of those networks and the types of applications you can develop. The first generation of blockchain probably had more problems than solutions, but you can't underestimate those solutions. Those were really transformational. But all the problems that came up are now getting addressed in this next generation. So yeah, we're out of the trough of disillusionment, and I think people are going to just completely underestimate where blockchain is going to go over the next 5 years.
There's a lot to learn here, I think. You know, Lawrence mentioned there's rational exuberance. I think there's irrational exuberance going on right now in the market with blockchain and especially cryptocurrency and all. As for the Gartner hype cycle, yeah, they do this. I think it's a marketing ploy, which kind of works for most of the technologies. But I think blockchain, in my opinion at least, does not really fit into that hype cycle. And the reason I think is, yes, as Adam said, that the first version of blockchain has been tested and it's been in implementation. But I think there'll be multiple such cycles with newer technologies, newer versions, etc. Each and every one will come with its own exuberance. Each and every one will come with its own hype cycle. Each and every one will come with its stuff and all that. So that's my feeling at this stage.
So I like that. Now I'm just going to move to the next question then. So out of all of the different ways, so we had earlier in the panels, we talked about the ways that you can create financial models for blockchain. So we talked about being a miner. We talked about being a broker or an exchange, a new blockchain platform, or winning an ICO lottery. Or enabling a blockchain, so being the picks and shovels, or being an application creator. So which one are you guys really excited about, or which couple are you excited about? And then on the flip side, which ones are you not excited about as one of those models for financial security with blockchain?
I'm not exactly sure what winning the ICO lottery is, but I do think you missed a very important business model, and maybe that was inside of that category. The idea of token-operated open source. The idea, previously, if you had open source software, you gave it away, and you were lucky if you figured out how to make money on it. And then there were a few business models that were developed around that, around supporting services, but maybe a company that was better than you did better services on the software that you developed. But Satoshi is a billionaire, and he's anonymous. Nobody knows who he is. And he proved that you can actually create an open source network, and the value accumulates to that network, and you accumulate within that value by having a token that operates that network and governs that network. And some new blockchains are experimenting with using the token as a system of governance. So these open source networks govern themselves, and they create an alignment of different economic actors. And so you're actually designing new economic systems that haven't existed previously. And it's a different type of business. It's not a corporation. But it's not free software. It's open source. It's an open source economical network funded by a token. So that's the ICOs. If you look at the ICOs that have raised the most money, most of them follow that pattern. And people think that it's just a massive overinvestment of capital into, but they're looking at it in terms of as if this were a C corporation. And it's not. I mean, these open source networks are raising capital, and a lot of these networks are then putting that capital back towards people building on that platform and incentivizing all the economic actors that are involved. So it's an economy. It's not a company.
Yeah, I like that. It's new for us.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really interesting viewpoint. I personally have a hard time kind of distinguishing between the list that you described. I think what I'm excited about is who is solving a real problem. How big is this problem today? How big is this problem going to be in the future? Why hasn't it been solved with like the traditional methods, like a distributed database? You know, there are lots of very good databases out there. And that's always a question that comes up when you talk about blockchain. You know, why not just use a database and the existing technology? So, you know, what I look for is, again, big problem, can be solved by traditional means and hasn't been solved for one reason or another. And you know, what is, market is probably not the exact way to frame it, because the market is so nascent. We're interested about crypto, but how much time do we spend in technology? Like, what about everyone else? So how big is the market? And you know, going back to like, monetization is probably not going to happen right away. You know, it's going to take some time.
Is there a specific problem that you're really excited about for blockchain to solve? I mean, I heard about ID. Is there another one that just you personally are excited for the application of blockchain to solve?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are lots.
Right,
there are lots.
right.
There are lots of use cases that you know, we're constantly excited. It's just a matter of which one is going to happen first. But I'd say, you know, the identity is very interesting. The whole like digital asset ownership is very, very interesting. You know, there's Crypto Kitties in Vancouver, which kind of like, it's a way for you to sell digital cats using Ethereum, Ether. So while it sounds like a fun gamification type of toy project, it actually could be a serious business because you're training people and you're experimenting on how to own and sell digital assets. And you can do this directly, or you can do it in-game, or, there's so many different applications, and that's why Andreessen Horowitz and Union Square Ventures wrote, I believe it was a $12 million check, for CryptoKitties, and you can actually breed those kitties and sell those kitties for hundreds of thousands of dollars, Ether-denominated dollars. So yeah, there are lots of digital assets, definitely an area of interest for me. And there are other things like voting and government services, such as remitting your pension or Social Security, utilities like energy storage. There's so many different areas, just a matter of which one is going to happen when.
So here are my thoughts. ICOs. I'd rather go to Vegas. At least I'll have some fun instead of betting on them. Mining is becoming kind of challenging, as we know. It's become so competitive. The first person who adds the block and the other nodes, etc., miners. It's become so competitive that it's not even the original sense of miner it used to be. Miners are now businesses, with their network centers, with ASICs, like application-specific integrated circuits and whatnot. So they've become businesses. And this is actually, the more miners, the lesser the transaction fees that they end up getting. Where will it end up? We don't know. It, of course, depends on the number of transactions, but then unless the transactions fees go up, I'm not sure how they'll continue to make money. Brokers, wallets, etc., I think they're in a good place. Because of the hype, they'll end up making the most money out of the all. So that is one area I'd rather bet on, but not too many. We have to make sure that the exchange, the broker, the wallet we bet on has the right technologies, because this is a super complex problem. As Maria mentioned, it's all about distributed systems, security, lots of things, right? So it's not an easy problem to solve. That is one thing that's probably makes money, and monetization happens there. Others, I'm not sure of. Crypto is, again, a bet that we are making that things will happen. But again, going back to my point, the intrinsic value in a cryptocurrency versus the perceived value that gets traded, who benefits at the end of the day? Is it the companies, the product, the businesses, or it's the bettors? And again, when I talk to my colleagues, they all say that, hey, how is it different than Google and Amazon and Microsoft? But I feel there's a distinct difference here, because they are creating actual products, and I'm sure these people end up creating actual products and tie those cryptos to and tokens to these products and services. Then we'll have some intrinsic value in my mind. And I can give you a use case if you like, which I would like to see, or I can wait.
No, yeah, go ahead.
So I don't know how many of you are familiar with one of the largest frauds in India recently that happened in the diamond industry, right? So just one individual, one company actually created a fraud of almost $2 billion. And he was a diamond merchant. And we all trust, right? We all trust the way the system works. I buy a diamond, it comes with a certificate of authenticity. Now, what if the certificate itself was a fraud? It was a fake. So this is an excellent example in my mind that blockchain could be applied to, from the source to the destination, from the mine to the consumer. There could be a trackability which cannot be changed at all at each and every stage and state. Any updates, anything could be recorded. So you know exactly this number diamond, this is a certificate, this is what it is, this is the ownership, this is the track. Something like that I'd love to see that. But again, that's not a startup kind of a problem. It's like a huge problem to solve.
Oh, I think that it is. It's a supply chain problem, and it is an excellent use case, and we're seeing lots of companies. I mentioned the coffee company. There are others that can apply this. We like boring, right? Our favorite stuff is ordinary, everyday. We call ourselves blockchain realists. You mentioned government. Love it. Why? Anybody buy any property, you've got to pay the bank, the buyer, the seller, the mortgage company. All of those have paper handoffs and manual processes that can be more efficiently done on the blockchain. And I usually ask this in a larger crowd, but how many of you still have a fax machine? Don't be shy, we're all friends. Somebody raised their hand. Usually in a crowd of 100, we get about 5. There's still people transacting business in 2018 with fax machines. There is a unique opportunity to replace it with a blockchain.
Can I just quickly add that I really agree with that use case, the real estate and all. In fact, when we had the blockchain workshop, there was this company that Maria and I actually fortunately ended up in Maria's team and we mentored. And this was exactly the problem they were trying to solve, the escrow process where, exactly as Lauren said, there are multiple players, nobody knows what the heck is going on, notification, nobody knows precisely. Huge amounts of frauds happen, monies get transferred, God knows where they are going. That's a classic example. And, I would have actually invested in that company had it really gone through.
Are they still around?
Are they still around, can we say?
Well, we can talk offline, but the 3 of us can do a deal.
Offline, we can do it, yes.
It was part of the hackathon. So, sort of switching gears now, do you think that Seattle is a cluster for blockchain? I mean, of course, we have some of the greatest investors here locally. But, I mean, is this really a magnet area for blockchain? And what are the other big ecosystems for blockchain startups in the world?
Yeah, Seattle definitely has a huge and growing blockchain community, not from the standpoints of the investors, but from the standpoints of the companies. I mean, BitREx is located in Seattle. CoinZ, the first Bitcoin ATM company in the United States that was regulated, is located in Seattle. We have 2 blockchains in Seattle. We have RChain and we have Dragon Chain. We have 2 venture capital companies that have spun out of one of those chains, and there'll probably be more. We have a number of growing startups. We had Unicorn do an ICO recently. We had the StormX Microtest place do an ICO recently. So yeah, Seattle has a very vibrant ecosystem in the blockchain space. Nick Szabo's a University of Washington alumni. We have cypherpunks who went to UW. We have cryptographers who are at the UW, one of the cryptographers who developed elliptical curve cryptography. So Seattle definitely has a strong ecosystem. There are other cities that have large ecosystems, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York. I wonder why Seattle doesn't have a more obvious ecosystem, because the ecosystem in Seattle is not obvious. They're not the huge events that there are in the other cities. They're not the events that get huge audiences. This audience pales in comparison to the audience you would pull on a Sunday night in San Francisco. Yeah, I would like for there to be a larger blockchain ecosystem in Seattle. I think there are a number of events that are coming up.
And we do have a member in our community, and that is in October, right?
Over.
September, what's the dates? And what's it called again?
Blockchain Seattle
There.
2018.
So there you go. So
Yeah, perfect.
So we'll be relaunching the blockchain community in Seattle with those events, hopefully.
Yeah, I think there are lots of cities and countries that are paying a lot more attention at the state and city and county levels. A good example is Illinois, right? Illinois has this blockchain initiative. Chicago has a blockchain center.
They'll be at the conference.
They'll be at the conference. But why don't we just create something like that in Seattle, right? Because that's the right way to promote it's a critical element of the whole ecosystem. We can provide the support, the education, the knowledge, the information, right, as to what does it really take to build a blockchain company? What does it really take to build a technology? Seattle, I find more as geeks, being one of them, maybe that's why I feel that way. But we create something that has real value, and we can create products for the future. This is still, in my opinion at least, it's a little further out, so we'll get there. But I think something like this would really promote, especially because in my view, the kind of applications like in government and what we said, it cannot really happen on your own. If I want to do something in blockchain, I want to work with the county governments for property taxes, deeds of trust. I need their support. So if we have a buy-in from them or the healthcare system, we can go on with the use cases. But this is hard to do without the support of the local governments and the state government.
So you talked about state governments, local governments. What should Washington State do? What, as citizens of Washington State, what should we be advocating for? What policies need to be changed? Can you give us some insights on that?
So there's a lot of activity going on. I'm working on a political action committee. Someone in the governor's office has asked a number of us to step in. So we're going to hook you up after this and pull you into the community. There are a lot of events. The ones that's being sponsored that was mentioned earlier. There are 2 other major events. Pithia is connected with the UW blockchain group. There are a lot of other groups that are pulling people together. So earlier I spoke about irrational exuberance. Ours is quiet exuberance. Why, in Seattle? Why? Flip it over. We've got the best devs that are coming out of a lot of great tech companies, and they're the ones who are driving this forward. So are we banging our fists on the table? Maybe it's time to do that. But a lot of people, particularly around our chain, Unicorn, StormX, you mentioned CoinMe, so many other companies are delivering, executing every day and delivering value for their teams.
See, what I mean exactly is maybe these solutions are not, the purest blockchain believer will hate me for saying this, but there are these permitted and off-block kind of storage systems which has to be incorporated and it will work in conjunction that way. But the buy-in from the government, right? The government has to be open to be able to provide the information data, work with these other providers. That is key to happen. So we have to work with the legislatures and whatnot to make this happen. And that is exactly what's happening in Chicago and Illinois. They are actually working with the lawmakers and all, and these organizations.
Yeah, well, I agree with everything that's been said. And one thing to add is that Wenatchee, actually, we're streaming to your campus there, is establishing itself as like a great place to mine for Bitcoins. There is there are a number of different innovative data centers being built, a gigawatt.
There's gigawatt power
Gigawatt,
there,
yeah. And it's something that the state has done right, and maybe we're not talking about it as much as we should be.
One more thing. We have the cheapest and cleanest power in the United States. There are 5 major mining facilities, as Maria was pointing out. We're really quiet about it. If you want to bang your fist on the table, we're up here. Come find us.
And the counties are feeling the pinch, though.
So I do want to leave some time for a lot of questions from the audience. But before we move into the audience section, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur who is interested in starting a blockchain company? Haresh, maybe we'll start with you this time. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I have. Yep.
So we all know, right? Investing is not for the faint-hearted. Now just multiply it by 1,000 times. And that's what investing in blockchain is at this point in time. It's super speculative. The other thing I'd like to say is educate yourself. Really know what you're getting into. Because these are not simpler and smaller. I mean, unless you care, it's like, are you trying to develop an application on the iPhone? Versus are you trying to really make a difference using the platform, building the platform, trying to make something really meaningful? That is a long-term investment in terms of time, resources, all kinds of resources, expenses. You have to give it a thought, and at the end of the day, how do you create those partnerships that I believe will be necessary to make these things happen, the channels, whoever it is, the government, whatever it is. That would become super important to actually gain some sort of meaningful following, whoever it is, again. It depends on a per-case basis. That is very important. And at the end of the day, it's all about monetization. I don't believe in just creating a currency and then selling it in the market and trying to use that money. I believe in creating real value. So where will that funding come from until you are able to create that company and build that value? So these are some really, I think they're important anyways to start a company. It makes it a little more imperative for blockchain startup guys to look at and think about this.
It's 10% ideas, 90% execution. It's having a plan, figuring it out, knowing how to make course corrections, and getting it done. We just came off 54 hours of Startup Weekend, Blockchain Edition, here in Washington. Killer. Great ideas. People came out of it excited, enthused, with good ideas to go forward. That's what it takes.
Matt, do you want to?
Yeah. So my suggestion would be for entrepreneurs not to consider blockchain just a technology that they incorporate somehow into their business, and not to consider blockchain or ICOs just as a way to raise money or as a marketing tool, but take the jump and go deep down the rabbit hole, because it's a really big and interesting rabbit hole. And I think you really have to understand that technology and then explore the different paradigm shifting things that you can do, and then come out the other side and then decide what you're going to do for your business. Because the companies that are just incorporating blockchain is like they incorporate a database or seeing it as just a way to raise easy money. Those companies are very transparent. The people who are putting large amounts of money into the space, and we're talking about some of the venture capital firms and investors in Silicon Valley, New York, and the blockchain companies themselves that have set up private equity firms, they see through all this transparency very quickly. And as an ordinary investor, you probably don't. You probably don't see the difference between this company that doesn't actually have the technology and the company that's actually doing something very innovative with what you can do. But yeah, go ahead and jump down the rabbit hole first.
Kind of along those lines and just broadening it beyond founders, I'm curious, how many of you have purchased or have any kind of crypto? Raise your hand. Okay. So a piece of advice that I got when I first started looking in the space was, skip dinner and use the money to go and figure out how to buy whatever currency, and it was even more specific advice, which was the ideal mix would be a third Bitcoin, a third Ether, and a third Ripple. And then, whatever leftover money you have from your dinners, go and buy some of those new tokens, assuming that you're going to lose your money, but, it's just dinner money. So, for anyone who is kind of interested, not just in blockchain, but just the crypto space, I'd say try and don't break the bank, but try and get your hands dirty or just go and test it. And I think in the process of figuring out, Bittrex is the exchange here locally, and it's one of the highest quality exchanges. So in the process of kind of figuring out the first application, which is in the cryptocurrencies, you may get a lot of ideas as to what needs to be improved and what are additional things that you can do with blockchain or cryptocurrencies in general. So that would be my piece of advice.
One thing, if I may, I'd like to add is, right now what I see, and maybe it's different than what you see, is, blockchain is a technology in search of a solution. Let that not be the case. I would strongly recommend and encourage you to go get your creative ideas and build a company, and then see if blockchain is the technology that fits as a solution, which is probably the best, and that's how I would go about proceeding, not the other way around.
Perfect. So then we will open up to questions. So we will be taking questions over here. So if you do want to stand up, and then we'll have a line sort of forming around Suni and then down by John. So is there any questions so far? You want to come up to the... Yeah.
Reminder to keep your questions concise and then also answers concise as well, so we can rotate people through.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. So my question is, as for someone who's just starting to learning blockchain, just getting your feet into it, do you have any good book to recommend to read just to get started?
I don't have a book, but there are a number of different presentations. If you go literally on YouTube, that's a good starting point that I would recommend. And there have been a number of conferences. So the EdCon just wrapped up in Toronto. That was the Ethereum Community Conference. There's great resources from that and great videos and great talks. So I would start that way. I don't know if there's a book.
Yeah, no books. For the developers, for the business people, Discord and Telegram are sort of the AT&T for the blockchain world. You get a lot of information there. SlideShare has also got a large number of PowerPoints, so it's extremely organic at this point. Find your favorite projects. Archain's developer.archain.coop has got a lot of materials. Ethereum Foundation does. All of the others have their own documentation. That's where you'll start.
So I won't give you a book, but I'll give you a podcast. I really like Adam Draper's Boost VC podcast. Adam Draper started a blockchain-only venture studio in 2013. He was very early. He since added virtual reality and science fiction to his accelerator, but it's a very interesting podcast. Also, everything that Naval Ravikant has written and talked, if you listen to some of his talks, as well as like Nick Szabo, Ian Grigg, there's some very interesting talks that you can find on the internet, either in podcasts or YouTube.
I guess the first thing I could suggest is finding Satoshi's white paper and going through it. That's the most fundamental, rudimentary thing I would start with. And that should be all over the internet. I had to look up that name because I always mess up that name, which is Andreas Antonopoulos. He has something really interesting to talk about. You might want to go through, read what he has to say. And Eric, there are a few other guys, but one of the good things if you really want to educate yourself is try to go to as many websites and read up their white papers. They will actually explain step by step what they are trying to do, why they are trying to do, how they will build their companies on top of existing Ethereum or some other basic, well-reputable and trustworthy blockchain implementations. And that'll give you an idea of what people are thinking about working, and that might help you even more than just, if you are really interested into the technology, that's a totally different thing. But these are about on the business side of things.
What about just kind of following up with that too? What are the news sources you guys read to get the latest on blockchain and what's going on in the landscape?
Well, I just try to talk with smart people, like Lawrence, and there are a lot of people in Seattle. Ken Miyoshi is one of the guys I really admire. He used to be I think, financial analyst as one of the firms here. He quit, and for the last 4 years, this is all he's dedicated his life to. And if I talk about permitted blockchain or anything, he's willing to kill me. He's such a purist. But the kind of information you get from these people who spend their times, it's just unbelievable. You cannot find it anywhere else because they've aggregated it from so many different sources and they come up with, it's again, now you can argue that it's an opinion. But if you talk with 4 different guys and see there's an overlap of opinion or something who have spent their lives, maybe that's a good source, starting point. Talk the heck out of everyone. It's good for entrepreneurs.
I'm biased towards the venture side of things, but talking to entrepreneurs in the space, as well as venture investors in the space, I find that to be the most useful for keeping up with what new technologies are out there and what new companies are doing. And there's a lot of companies all doing very similar things. That's because there's very similar problems and there's very similar solutions. So keeping up with everything that's going on. Conferences are great. I hope a lot of the conferences start posting videos on the internet because you don't have to pay the $1,000 or $2,000 to go to a conference. You can just go out, a couple weeks or months afterwards when they post the videos and just watch them yourself. A lot of the pitches for startups, pitching in the blockchain space are very interesting. There's a huge range of quality. So finding good curators and then finding what you can find through those curators is the way to go. I would totally ignore Telegram.
Crypto Slate is here in Washington. CoinDesk has a lot of good, timely, topical information. I try to write 3-4 times a week on my LinkedIn. I use that as posting. Medium has got some great articles. Search on blockchain, Ethereum, cryptocurrency, Archain. Look for the other projects. Google Alerts is really good to set that up and troll through and find lots of good information.
If I must say something, I would just encourage you to also look into the naysayers. Like, why are some people so negative on not just blockchain but crypto in general, and read that too because it's important to keep in mind.
Just one other source I thought of. I forget this. I'm really bad with names. I didn't write his name down, so I don't have it. But this person had a blockchain startup. He runs the Y Combinator blockchain fund. You should be able to find it with Ferries, or you can get back. I mean, I can share it with you if you are interested. But he has some of the deepest thoughts about the whole technology and what it really takes to build something like that. And again, his thought is very clear that it's all about building the right platform, the right tools, and things will happen, and not the other way around.
Perfect. Do you have any more questions? And again, just go ahead and want to come up here. Again, since we are recording this and live streaming to Wenatchee, it's really good that we do speak to the microphone so that they can actually hear the questions. So that's one of the reasons that we make you do this instead of going around.
So I'm very excited about the possibility of technology simplify our life. And then in the meantime, I'm very timid about this technology. And Lawrence mentioned about, about execution. So I'm just wondering whether you guys can share with me, how do I sort of like, based on where we have right now, like seeing the opportunity, but also afraid, how do we pull ourselves together and sort of like helping the team, transfer idea into reality? Is there any core skills that you are willing to share? Thank you.
Go to studios, right? They can help you take ideas.
Well, since John's here, John runs a lean startup program. That's one great way to do it, is to take those ideas, get them into a format, and keep iterating until you get it. Try and fail. I mean, there's lots of things. I think the angel community and the other parts of the startup community, this goes for anything, not just blockchain, are providing resources to help, and that's where I would look, and that's a place to start.
I'll answer now. So there's a habit of people thinking that blockchain changes the rules of startups, and it really doesn't. So just the standard things of doing a startup, the advice like doing customer development, having an in-house technical team, everything that you'll learn on like a startup school, for example, is a school that they do at Stanford in combination with Y Combinator. You should go through all the videos. Just learn about doing startups. If you're an investor, actually, I think you should learn about angel investing, because I think the standpoint of an angel investor is the right way to approach crypto investing. As an entrepreneur, you should study startups, lean startup, all the startup methodologies that have been developed over the last 20 years. And in the 90s, a lot of that was very opaque, but it's all very well known and tested now. So blockchain, just because it's blockchain doesn't change any of the rules. And especially on fundraising, lots of people think that ICOs change the rules on fundraising. It's still about relationships. It's still about getting investors to commit before you start your fundraising round. ICO is not easy money. It's very hard money. It's high-risk money as well. So it's completely wrong to think just because it's blockchain that the rules of startups have changed.
Yeah, I agree. It's in fact, just last week we had a panel on ideas at GIX. So some people will say ideas are a dime a dozen. Some will say it's all about the idea. Some will say it's all about the execution. But I think it's a combination of everything. The first, I usually recommend to entrepreneurs, they are usually afraid of sharing their ideas, thinking, hey, somebody will take it and run it and start a business. Really? I mean, if your idea is good enough, there could be room for multiple players. So the key thing is to get out and talk to as many people as you can, bounce your ideas with people. You'll be amazed at the kind of feedback you'll get. People are smart. Even if they're not, they'll think that way and they'll give their perspective, which will help you refine as you go about. So I wouldn't worry about somebody, unless it's like one click on Amazon. Yes, that's so quickly and doable. So that's a different story. But then you wouldn't need to bounce ideas. You just go and implement, do it. Otherwise, this is the best thing I've found. Talk to as many people. There are co-working spaces nowadays. They're full of entrepreneurs, bursting with that exuberance. They're all in the same boat. You'll learn a lot. It's unbelievable.
Sure. I'm graduating this June with my MBA, so anybody out there who need to introduce or organize blockchain event, please contact me. Let me know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes,
very
thank
much.
you.
Hi. Thank you for putting on this event. My question regards the intersection of humanitarian projects and decentralized identity. Briefly, I'm a graduate student at the Jackson School here with International Studies, and our institute is providing consulting services for a startup that's supposed to solve the issue of statelessness among a marginalized group in Southeast Asia. And it's very exciting, and we're hoping that we can solve it. I was wondering if you could comment on this briefly.
Yeah, I have one comment. Yeah, it's a very, identity is a very fundamental aspect of blockchain technology. And there was, Jonathan in the audience just ran a startup weekend over in Bellevue, a blockchain startup weekend just this past weekend, and there was even a startup there that was looking at helping homeless people build reputation via a biometric but pseudonymous identity, such that they didn't have to expose necessarily who they are to the large network of vendors and charities, but they could build their own reputation on the blockchain. So yeah, identity and reputation systems are fundamentally transformative, as well as governance. You know, Tim Draper had the idea that terrestrial governments and virtual governments would depart from each other, and you can experiment with different types of governance that doesn't require permission of some central authority to say, yes, you're a citizen or you're not a citizen. You can participate in economic networks without the permission of your government, potentially. So yeah, it's transformative all the way up and down the scale to the most vulnerable people right now: refugees, homelessness, you know, people living in third world countries, people living under dictators, Venezuela, for example, all the way up through how we're going to re-architect the governments that we live under in the first world country.
Thank you for doing this great work and trying to solve a big problem. I think, you know, generally in the kind of international development nonprofits space, there's a lot of room for blockchain applications, especially if you look at like donations and things like that. Just being able to track exactly what happens gives a lot more transparency, and that's one of the big use cases of the blockchain, like transparency and auditability to any kind of effort, no matter whether it's exchanging money or documenting people, help give them identity. So hopefully you can find some good applications there.
Yeah. We're seeing it all over the place. There's a large state government or city government that's trying to do this with city services. So there's lots of applications. If you're interested, can hook you up with some more information.
This is precisely what I meant when I said that you need partnerships with either governments, organizations, because this is something really necessary. And people have tried to do this with or without the blockchain. Maybe this makes it much better.
Thank you.
Good luck.
So hi, I'm Jason. And I was also in the startup weekend 2 days ago. There are so many amazing ideas like sending tokens and intellectual properties like homeless, and great mentors too. But one of the issues we face is that we are concerned about why do we need to use blockchain and or blockchain applications. And if we use blockchain, how do we get income from the customers? Since if you decentralize the application, most of the time you just send it out to the web and then you have no control to the application. So I want to hear more like maybe technical side advice about how do we, why do we choose blockchain and how do we monetize it?
That's what I'd like to know as well.
Yeah.
Earnable tokens. At the end of the day, when you're doing Bitcoin transactions, you're getting paid to do accounting. There need to be node operators all around the blockchain that are doing the writes. I mean, it's more complicated than that without going into all the algorithms and such, but you're getting paid to write to them and validate it. That's where the majority of transactions will come, and when all of the Bitcoins are mined or in ecosystems where the mining is pre-done, that's where people are making transactions. That's one of the first questions that we always ask is, what's your earnable token?
Yeah, I think where blockchain is very interesting is where you have participants in a network who don't trust each other. They don't like each other. They're never going to agree on any sort of central authority. And so you can create a system whereby the network works without people necessarily agreeing or liking each other, or agreeing upon, what is the central authority? You look at different networks like Visa. Visa was started by a bunch of banks and it became sort of a cartel. They don't want to allow other people in that. But Visa got a lot of power and took that away from the banking system. And so there's all sorts of, businesses where you're involving a lot of different parties that don't necessarily like each other, but they need to operate economically, and that's where blockchain is extremely powerful. So like I said, you kind of want to go down the rabbit hole and come back out and then figure out, design a business around that rather than necessarily figure out how blockchain fits into your business. But I'm happy to talk about your business and how blockchain might fit in.
And then I think we have one more question.
Did you really get your answer, what you're asking about?
So, since sometimes we don't necessarily, all right, he answered that question. Okay. So how do we monetize the blockchain business? Right now we can send tokens.
Point of view, not the miners and all that, right?
Mm-hmm. Not the miner, just the owner of the business.
So that's, again, it's a key question. And I agree with the other thing. There are going to be consortium kind of blockchains which will take care of all the trust amongst corporations and businesses. But
So when you design the token economics, you can usually design different incentive structures. So you can design what economic values goes to who based on what actions. So it's actually very easy to figure out then how to monetize and who gets what. Just based on how your token functions in the model itself. Whether you're getting a commission, whether the founding foundation or the developers are getting a token to launch the network, whether you're having a bounty system. Just the design of the token economics gets into architecting that. One challenge is, it's debatable that Bitcoin perhaps overcompensates miners now, and they over-incentivized mining. And because the protocol can't change, it's just that way. So thinking about how to experiment with that token economics and be able to change it. And that's why a lot of these systems are actually creating government systems so that they can agree on how the protocol can change over time, whether something is beneficial or not.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Well, so we do have one last question, and then we'll leave some time for you guys to give a last comment for the community.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it, Elizabeth. I am the one who's running the Blockchain Seattle conference. If you have any questions about that, let me know, or check out the website, blockchainseattle.io. Quick question on the technical side, though. Really curious, public protocol perspective, there's still significant technical challenges that we're trying to address, scalability, a number of others. I'm curious, of the public protocols, which ones do you like? Or actually, let me rephrase that. Of the newer ones, the 2.0 or 3.0 protocols, which ones do you like and why do you like them?
Got to say our chain, because we're certainly partners in the project. Stellar, NEM, EOS, there's a lot of merit in all of them. I think at the end of the day, it's looking at how they're architected and the actual delivery of the code that comes out. It's a very long question for the end. Thanks, Jonesy.
Without being a deep expert by any stretch of the imagination on that question, I would say speed of settlement and how many transactions per second they can handle. That is a big limitation for Bitcoin and also for Ethereum. I think it's 10 transactions per second. So, things like Ripple have figured it out, but like figuring out which architecture allows for solving those common problems, that would be how I would start.
Perfect. Then maybe we'll just I know we're short on time, so maybe you guys can just kind of give one last comment to the crowd about blockchain, maybe some inspiration for the community or things that they should be thinking about as they go forth.
First of all, thanks for having us here. And my comment is, go iterate, fail, try again, don't give up, talk to as many people as you can. And yes, I know, maybe we're 5 to 10 years away from seeing any kind of meaningful, large-scale deployment application, but now is the time to actually be an entrepreneur in this space. So leverage all kinds of resources and let us know how we can help.
Couldn't have said much more. There's over $500 million of working capital in play in Washington. Come to events, come to meetups, come find us. pitch your ideas.
So they say that blockchain and crypto is a virus, and so learn about it and tell people about it. That's how the virus spreads.
I don't know how I can top that, but yes, blockchain is here to stay. It's one of the best technologies so far. It's just like the internet in '94, as Lauren said. Mark Andreessen was asked, like, okay, so you say this is the coolest thing ever on the planet. Give me some examples. And absolutely could not come up with a single example to say why the internet was good. But look at us today. Right? It spans the spectrum of applications and websites and what we can do. I think we are at that nascent stage with blockchain. This is the time. But the first and key and foremost important thing is to study, figure out what it is before you jump into it. Otherwise, it might be too deep to get out.
Perfect. So help me in thanking the panelists here today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so